No, one. This story is based on the real accounts of soldiers who served in World War I. During that time, it was common for soldiers to look out for their best friends. Sometimes they'd even carry their wounded comrades on their backs through no man's land. These acts of bravery are a testament to the power of friendship and loyalty. No. Two, the setting of the story, a small Midwestern town, is significant because it reflects a time when communities were closer knit. The close relationships and strong bonds within these communities played a huge role in shaping the decisions people made during the war. Number three, the characters of Daniel and James represent the many young men who enlisted in the war. These young men were not just soldiers, but also our sons, brothers, husbands, and friends. Their stories deserve to be remembered. Number four, the story explores themes of brotherhood, loyalty, and the bonds of friendship. It shows how these connections can shape our lives and help us through our darkest moments. And no. Five, the ending of the story provides a sense of hope and resilience. It shows how even in the face of great loss and suffering, life can go on and we can find happiness and healing in our relationships. Now, let's dive into the story. The world was at war, and the battlefields of Europe were scarred with smoke, mud, and sorrow. Among the countless young men who marched into that storm were two who shared a bond deeper than most. Their names were James Miller and Daniel Hayes. They weren't just soldiers. They were brothers in all but blood. They had grown up in the same small Midwestern town. James lived 2 houses down from Daniel, and from the time they were old enough to run barefoot in the grass, they had been inseparable. Summers were spent fishing in the river that curled through the valley, chasing baseballs until the sun went down, and daring each other to climb the tallest trees. Winters were filled with snowball fights, late-night talks by the fireplace, and promises whispered in the dark about the future. Daniel was the dreamer, the one who always had a smile and a wild plan. James was quieter, steadier, the one who kept them out of trouble when Daniel's ideas got too bold. Together, they balanced each other perfectly. To everyone in town, they were known as the boys, always side by side, always looking out for one another. When the war came, there was no question of what they would do. Daniel was the first to suggest enlisting, his eyes burning with determination. "We can't just stay here while everyone else goes," he had said. James hesitated, not because he was afraid, but because he knew what war could take. Still, when Daniel placed a hand on his shoulder and said, "We go in together, we come back together," James agreed. Training was grueling, but they endured it side by side. In the mud, in the sweat, in the long march, under blistering sun, they had each other. At night, they shared letters from home, jokes to ease the fear, and whispered plans of what they would do once it was all over. They swore they would build houses next to each other, marry, raise families, and sit on their porches watching their children play just as they had once done. But dreams often collided with reality on the battlefield. One night, their unit was ordered to advance through enemy lines. The sky glowed red from distant fires, and the air shook with explosions. Gunfire cracked in the darkness, tearing through the night like lightning. Men shouted, ran, fell. Chaos swallowed them whole. James kept his eyes on Daniel, moving as close to him as the battle allowed. But in the haze of smoke, he lost sight of him. Panic gripped his chest. He shouted Daniel's name, searching, his boots slipping in the mud as bullets hissed past. Then he saw him lying on the ground, blood soaking through his uniform. James's heart nearly stopped. He sprinted forward, dropping to his knees beside his best friend. Daniel's face was pale, his breathing shallow. He reached for James weakly and whispered, "Don't leave me here." James's throat tightened. "I won't. I swear I won't." The world around them was still raging, but in that moment, James saw only Daniel. He slid his arms under him, lifted him onto his back, and rose to his feet with a strength he didn't know he had. Daniel was heavy every step of battle, but James carried him as if his own life depended on it. Bullets tore up the dirt near his feet, shouts rang in his ears. A shell exploded so close it knocked him to his knees, but he clutched Daniel tight, refusing to let go. "Hold on," James whispered again and again, as much to himself as to Daniel. "I'm taking you home." For hours, he stumbled forward. His legs trembled, his shoulders screamed with pain, but he never stopped. The weight on his back wasn't just his friend's body. It was every memory they shared, every promise they had made, every dream they had whispered as boys under the stars. He could not, would not, that be lost on a battlefield. By dawn, his body was broken with exhaustion, but he emerged from the smoke and fire into the safety of their lines. Medics rushed to him, pulling Daniel from his back. James collapsed onto the ground, chest heaving, vision blurred with tears and dirt, but he had done it. He had kept his promise. The doctors fought to save Daniel, and James refused to leave his side. He sat by his bed in the field hospital, holding his hand through fevered nights, speaking softly when Daniel drifted in and out of consciousness. He told him stories of home, of fishing at the river, of the time Daniel had stolen apples from old Mrs. Carter's tree and nearly got caught. He spoke until his voice was hoarse because he was terrified that silence might mean losing him forever. And then, against all odds, Daniel opened his eyes one morning and whispered, "You carried me." James laughed through his tears, gripping his hand tightly. "I told you, we go in together, we come back together." Daniel's recovery was slow, but he survived. The bullet had missed his heart by inches. He would walk with a limp, bear scars for the rest of his life, but he was alive, and he owed that life to James. When the war finally ended, the two men boarded the train home together. As it pulled into the small station of their hometown, families gathered, cheering and crying, waving flags. James stepped off first, steadying Daniel with an arm around his waist. The townspeople gasped at the sight, and then they began to cheer louder, tears streaming down their faces. Mothers clutched their sons tighter, fathers removed their hats in respect, and children looked up in awe. The boys had kept their promise. They had gone in together, and they had come back together. Life moved on. They married, built houses just as they had dreamed, and raised children who grew up playing side by side. Every time someone asked Daniel about the scar on his chest or the limp in his step, he would smile and say, "That's just proof that my best friend carried me home." James never thought of himself as a hero. To him, he had simply done what anyone would do for someone they loved like a brother. But in the quiet moments, when he sat on his porch and watched Daniel play catch with his son, or when they gathered with their families around the dinner table, James knew that the strength it took on that battlefield was the truest measure of his life. Because medals tarnish and stories fade, but the act of carrying his best friend home, of keeping a promise made in boyhood and fulfilled in war, would live forever in the hearts of those who knew them. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the story, please share it with your friends and family. Your support means everything to us.